So imagine if there's one equation that if you can solve procrastination each time. And every time you start a project or you start an assignment or anything that you're trying to achieve, you do just this one thing, you would annihilate procrastination. And this equation is something I discovered from doing 2 internships at NASA, because in my first NASA internship at the Kennedy Space Center, I was in a group of 8 engineers and I never had issues with procrastination because I had a lot of external motivation. I had a lot of engineers around me who were constantly keeping up with my progress, and that would motivate me to do the work. However, in my second NASA internship at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, I was working on a project by myself, so I was by myself for extended periods of time. So I did not have that extrinsic motivation, and I had to rely entirely on that intrinsic motivation, basically me motivating myself to do the work. And this is where procrastination likes to attack, when you're basically by yourself and there's not real accountability. Now, this actually got much worse when I joined a PhD program, because in the first year of my PhD, I would procrastinate quite a lot. And it was only when I figured this equation out that I was able to overcome it. Now, there are 4 reasons why people procrastinate or just cannot sit down and do the work. 1 is lack of clarity on the goal or what needs to be done. 2, lack of reasons, both intellectual and emotional, for why the goal has to be achieved or why the task has to be done or completed. 3, there's way too many distractions around. And 4, lack of tactics or a proper plan. So if we take each one of these 4 variables and solve for them individually and solve each of them, we would make it very unlikely that you procrastinate, because you know exactly what needs to happen, you know why you need to do it, you remove all the distractions, and you come up with a plan of how to do it. And this is where I introduce the dazzling achievement equation. I know it sounds very corny, but I couldn't come up with a better name. But essentially, as you can see, there are 4 variables where you're solving for A, which is the achievement or the goal that you're trying to achieve, or the task. And the likelihood of that being achieved is the other side of the equation, where you have Y. And Y is cubed because having reasons to achieve something is the most important thing. For example, if you have a deadline due midnight, your reason is very strong because you have to do it before the deadline. Otherwise, you'll get a 0. So why people put off things till last minute, because that Y number becomes really, really high as you approach the deadline. Now, D is squared. It's still relevant, but less important than the reasons, and it has a minus sign because that's something you actually want to subtract. So we want to bring this D as close to 0 as possible. And then finally, T, which is the tactics or the plan that you come up with. Now let me actually show you an example of how to use this thing. So I have the equation written down, and let's say that my goal is to write an essay. But you can't really stop there. You have to be more clear, like what type of essay is it and what is the essay about? So in this case, let's say write an essay about the collapse of the Roman Empire, factors that led to the collapse, which people had actual control over. And this basically, you want to get as clear as possible what actually needs to be achieved, because most of the time people struggle because they actually don't know what needs to be done. They're like, oh, I gotta write this essay, or oh, I gotta finish this project, but they don't really know what the project is about, or like all the little details of what the project's about. So you figured out what needs to happen, right? So in this case, this is the A, this is what needs to be achieved. And this is the most important thing, because you want to spend as much time figuring this out as possible. And then after that, you want to figure out the reasons why you're doing this. And ideally, this should be like as emotional as possible. So for example, I need to write this essay because I need to get a good grade in my history class, because that will give me a higher GPA, which will increase my odds of going to grad school. So if I don't do the best work I can for this, I may not get into graduate school, because this will lower my GPA significantly. Now this can be any reason really that has any emotional attachment. It could be, I don't know, it will make my parents happy, it will make my teacher happy, it will make me feel good about myself. But as long as you have a clear reason for why you're doing it, and again, as emotionally strong as possible, because you want to use your emotions with you to get the task completed. And again, because this is cubed, this is very powerful, so this is very important. Now next, we want to identify and remove distractions. So in my case, my distractions may be like my phone, which like means people texting you, people calling you, in which you can just put your phone away, and any other thing. It could be like clutter, so you could spend up some time, like a few minutes, just cleaning up your desk and whatnot. It could be thought, it could be like mental clutter, in which, I don't know, like you might be really angry at someone, or I don't know, whatever it is that's distracting you and keeping you from being able to focus on the goal. I would say eliminate that ASAP, and this is why this has a minus sign. And then finally, once you've identified the goal that needs to be achieved, once you've figured out the reasons for why it needs to be achieved, once you've eliminated distractions, finally, you have room to actually set up a plan. And this is where the self-help gurus and the productivity gurus, they will jump to this step immediately. They'll say, oh, like chip away little tasks at a time, break it into small tasks, which is like very valid. Like these are good tactics, but you can only really do that once you figure these things out. You can't really skip to this step, because if you don't even know what you need to do, you don't know why you're doing it, and you haven't figured out what's distracting you, what's the point of like breaking it to its like small components? You'll get distracted, you won't get to do it. So in this case, we could say that the tactic would be to break it into very small pieces, allocate time duration for each piece, and attack. So for example, what that would look like is like break into the intro of the essay, or like first you want to do like some research, grab resources, then you want to write the intro, write the middle of the essay, or like the actual meat of the essay, like the stuff you're gonna pull from the resources, write conclusion, add citations / references, and then perhaps like assign time duration to each one of these things. So like this is 1 hour, this is, I don't know, 30 minutes, this is 2 hours, this is 30 minutes, and then this is like 30 minutes, okay? And then perhaps assign like breaks between like these things. Another thing is like make sure that you're like well fed. Keep in mind that you're gonna get hungry. Do you have access to food? You don't wanna like take a long break to order food. But notice how all of this tactical stuff and planning takes place once you've actually figured out these things, which are far more important. Hence, this is like cubed, this is squared, and this is only to the first order. And obviously all these things add up to lead to this achievement or desired task. Now, I know you might be thinking, well, dude, this is like a lot of work. Why don't you just do it? Now, this is ideal for like a large project or like a medium project that may take more than like 30 minutes or 15 minutes. If it's something that like you can just kind of do and get done with, that's kind of excessive. You don't need to do that. But this is for like a large project or like an essay where, like, let's say you are going to invest 5-6 hours, and those 5-6 hours could become way less, or you could actually prevent yourself from spending like 30 hours because you have absolute clarity what needs to happen, why you're doing it, what you shouldn't be doing at that time, and how to actually go about it. Now, the other beautiful thing about this equation is that it is a form of productive procrastination where, for example, let's say you have this project that you really need to do and you're kind of putting it off. You can tell yourself, hey, I'm not gonna do the project, I'm gonna keep procrastinating on it, but I'm gonna at least do the equation. I'm gonna at least figure out what needs to happen. I'm gonna figure out why it's worth doing whatever. And once I'm done, I'm still probably not gonna do it. And you go ahead and you solve for these variables, which probably takes you, I don't know, like 1 minute. And you tell yourself, I'm only gonna do that. I don't really need to do the rest of it. But the magic is once you have clarity on what needs to happen, once you have clarity on why it needs to happen, once you remove distractions, and once you make a plan, once you do all these things, doing the task will become almost effortless because you've laid out the clear plan and all you got to do is just execute. Now, this equation is only one tactic or tool within a big toolbox of productivity that I use as a PhD student in electrical engineering. And I actually made a video about my productivity system. It should show up somewhere over here, so you should go ahead and watch that.